Good evening, everyone. It is just wonderful to see this turnout tonight. Thank you to the Delaware Council and to the News Journal for hosting this debate. My name is Sean Barney. I live in Wilmington with my wife Nikki, who is here tonight, and with our daughter Sophie. And as of this past week, we now have a new addition to our family, a feisty little puppy named Nala. You see, Nikki and I promised Sophie when she started kindergarten this past fall that she could get a puppy when she was a first grader. So the day she finished kindergarten this past spring, she started asking us about that puppy. It seems that she clearly understood the concept of being a rising first grader. You know, Sophie climbs in my lap from time to time, and she points to the scar on my neck. That's where you got your boo-boo, because you're a Marine. It's not easy explaining war to a 6-year-old, it's not. But I mean, how could I not treasure these moments with my daughter? I'm lucky to be here. Fighting with the Marines in Fallujah, I was shot through the neck. My platoon commander later said, none of us thought you were going to make it. I did make it, because of the Marines that I served with. They worked together to get me from a street corner in the center of the city of Fallujah to a surgical center on the outskirts of that city in just 12 minutes. We deserve a Congress that works together with the same urgency and sense of mission to address the great challenges facing this country today. To protect and expand Social Security and Medicare, to address the epidemic of gun violence in the city of Wilmington, where we're raising our family, and across this country, and to fix our broken politics. In the Marine Corps, no one ever asked us if we were Republicans or Democrats. We were expected to work together to perform our mission for the good of the country. As simple as that. We should expect nothing less from Congress. I've had the privilege in my career of serving in both the private sector and the public sector. In the private sector as the president of a Delaware venture capital firm, investing in startup small businesses. In the public sector as a senior advisor to Governor Markell in Dover and Senator Carper in Washington. I will go to Congress knowing that my mission is not to set the other party back, but to work with both parties to move our country forward. I am thrilled to be here, and I look forward to the discussion tonight. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. I think this is the critical question. I very much respect my colleagues, but I think the issue in this contest is who has the right experience for this job. Like Lisa and Brian, I have worked in Dover. I've helped the governor get real results there, to pass universal background checks and mandatory consecutive sentencing in Delaware and raise the minimum wage. But I've also worked on a policy and legislative basis in Washington. I'm the only candidate up here who's actually helped pass legislation through Congress and get it signed by the President. The only candidate who has helped expand Medicare to cover prescription drugs. I'm the only candidate on this stage who's had a foreign policy portfolio. This isn't a state office. This deals with global affairs. And I'm the only candidate up here who, as a Marine, has lived and seen the consequences of foreign policy decisions made in Washington on the ground in the Middle East. At a time when we have fewer veterans in Congress than at any point in our nation's history, it is important for our country it is important for the Democratic Party that when the chicken hawks start beating the drums for war again, that we have veterans in Congress who will not only have the wisdom to stand up to them, but the credibility to stand up to them. So I can say uniquely on this stage that I will be ready to lead and lead at the national level on day one in this office.
Thank you, Dr. Collage.
The answer to your question is it has to be a partnership between the federal level and the state level and local law enforcement. This is an issue that is personal to me. I've been shot. I spent a year of surgeries and physical therapy recovering from that. I have experience with this issue. After the terrible massacre in Newtown, I was policy director to the governor, and the governor asked me to lead our policy team in coming up with a package of gun safety proposals in response. I am very proud that the foremost policy that the governor put forward in response, universal background checks, got passed in this state. But it has to be a partnership because I'm very proud of that accomplishment and getting that done, but we're a small state, and it's as easy as going to a gun show in Virginia to work around that. So we need the support of Congress to step forward on this issue. I will be a voice on this issue like no other. The gun lobby has a simple approach on this issue. Dismiss those who take gun violence seriously by saying that you don't know guns. You never touched one, you're just out of touch, you don't understand people who own guns. Well, I shot as a boy. I became a marksman training in the Marine Corps. I handled weapons in Fallujah. They can't do that to me. What I will say back to them is, I've handled weapons of war. I know what they're for. I know what the M16 was designed to do. And it has no place in the community where I am raising my daughter. It has no place in your community either. And that is the voice that I will be in Congress.
Candidate Barney, stand.
Leadership by example. We need to talk, and I think Senator Carper is a great example in our delegation who's talked about people being active and encouraging healthy lifestyles. I think when you're in a position like this, that's an important role to play. But we also need to talk about the influence of big money in our politics, and this is one of those areas where our nutritional guidelines to people are frankly misleading, and it's criminal because of the influence of the food industry and the money that they spread around in Washington. I'm the first candidate in this race, the only candidate in this race who's put forward a comprehensive democracy reform proposal to change the way we finance our elections, to elevate the influence of smaller dollar contributions as against big money, to broaden participation in voting to counterbalance money by putting teeth back in the Voting Rights Act, by moving states towards automatic voter registration, and to do away with partisan gerrymandering. Because unless we fixed our politics, unless we loosen the grips of the special interests, we're going to continue to have this ridiculous situation where the federal government is actively misleading people about what's in their food and about the kind of health consequences Thank you. I jumped the gun a little bit and addressed this in the last question, started to talk about it. And I just want to say, with respect to Brian, I don't want to deny him anything on his website, any of his ideas. I'll only speak for myself. This was the first proposal that I put forth as a candidate, was a democracy reform proposal. Because whether this is the most important issue, I can tell you it's the first issue. Because we go around the state, we talk to you, we talk about the issues that are affecting people's lives. And as we look at our politics today, we know that what we can do in response is severely limited unless we can loosen the grip of the special interests. So it was the first proposal that I put forward. And the most important thing to do is absolutely to repeal Citizens United. But that's going to be hard, it's going to take time. And we need to figure out what we can do in the interim and look to states and localities that are using public matching funds to elevate the influence of smaller dollar contributions. And we do need to take on partisan gerrymandering. But I also think for somebody running for this office, you need to look in yourself. Because there's structural reform and then there is the disposition that people bring to this office. I've seen Congress at 3 stages. Senator Bill Bradley is a mentor of mine. I was his speechwriter when he ran for president. And when he served in the Senate, there were true giants there. They had their disagreements, they had their debates. That's always been true in Congress. But somewhere behind closed doors, they were meeting and figuring out what they could agree on, how they could address the issue, and move the country forward. I then had the opportunity to serve with Senator Carter. I was his policy director when he was first elected to the Senate. And I saw an institution in transition. Some of those people who were really committed to doing what was right for the country at the end of the day were still there, but there were a lot of these hotheads that had arrived who were more interested in scoring points and whether they had rubbed the other side's face in it than whether they got something done at the end of the day. You as an individual member have to go with a deep commitment to working on the other side of the aisle and taking risks to do what is right. There are going to be people who are angry at you. You're going to have to defend, we got some of this, but we didn't get that. But that's the job in a country as big, vast, and diverse as this, of over 300 million people. You come together, work together to move the country forward. This is a tremendously important question. We are at a hinge point in our economic history, I think, in Delaware. We're seeing some of our legacy employers downsize. We've seen others of them leave. And it's critically important that we make this a state where entrepreneurs are going to create and grow new businesses. I'm the president of a venture capital firm. This is what we do. We invest in entrepreneurs and their new ideas, help them grow, create good-paying jobs. And right now, we've got one of the great concentrations of scientific and technical talent in the world. We need reasons for optimism in this state. That's a great reason for optimism. DuPont, other companies have attracted enormously talented people here. And as some of them are tragically being separated, we need to give them the opportunity to start the next 2, 3, 4 DuPonts here in Delaware. We have that history. Think of W.L. Gore. I've worked on this issue as policy director to the governor. When I was policy director to the governor, we doubled the R&D tax credit for small businesses to promote innovation. We looked at what was getting in the way of small businesses. We did an agency-by-agency review of every agency of state government to identify regulations that were holding small businesses back. We identified 140 regulations that we simplified or eliminated. At the federal level, I've put forth a plan, an economic plan that includes making the R&D tax credit tradable. And we need to get back to funding basic research in this country. We're the country that went to the moon. We used to have great dreams and aspirations, and we've become the economy that disinvests in our future. The percentage of our budget in investments in infrastructure and research has plummeted. I will be a champion for dreaming big again and investing in our possibilities. Actually, if I might, I will address those three, but I would say Pakistan, actually, because of the possibility of loose nuclear nukes. This is the greatest threat that we face as a society, and I would put Russia in that camp because of the upkeep and maintenance that needs to be done on their enormous arsenal. We talked about this at previous debates. There's a lot of, the answer tends to be terrorism, and it's important that we address terrorism, but the real nightmare is nuclear proliferation on the Korean Peninsula, in the Middle East, and eventually a nuclear weapon falling into hands of people, non-state actors who could truly, in a way that most countries do not today, pose an existential threat to us. So I would identify that as the #1 challenge facing this country. The perspective that I bring to this question of U.S. intervention is as someone who was sent to fight in an unnecessary and disastrous war before we exhausted all diplomatic alternatives. When I think of the giddiness, and that's the only word I can use, the giddiness with which we got into that war, I think of a friend. Lance Corporal Matthew View, who was in my platoon. And I tell you, when we got to Fallujah, he thought he had just landed in his favorite video game. And that is, unfortunately, what war is to much of this country at this point, is something on TV. And that makes it dangerously easy to get into. And it makes it dangerous in terms of our commitment to the people whose lives we affect when we get there. Because when it gets ugly, we just want to turn it off. Lance Corporal View committed suicide last fall. He suffered from PTSD, undiagnosed. That's how his video gaming. So I feel strongly about this, and before I was ever a candidate for this office, we had the toughest vote in Congress since the Iraq War. It was on the Iran deal. And the President of the United States is to be commended, the Secretary of State is to be commended. They did something very hard. They took a lot of flack for it. They truly resorted to diplomacy first and made war a last resort. I wrote an op-ed commending them, saying I agreed with it. I participated in a press conference as a veteran, saying he was doing the right thing by our veterans. And I think we deserve to know from everyone in this race what they thought of that vote. I've been very public about where I stand because it's very personal, and I have yet to hear a position from the other candidates. I was his foreign policy and national security advisor, and I was privileged in that capacity to travel to Israel. And I came away with a deep love for the country. It's a vibrant democracy, more vibrant than I think many people realize from the news that we get. There are serious debates in Israel about the future that they want to take, the future of their country and their democracy. I'm a great admirer of the universal service. Young people almost universally there serve, and it makes them very civically engaged. It's something that we could learn from in promoting national service here. And it's a vibrant, technologically innovative economy, one of the leaders in the world. But what Israel deserves is a forthright friend. We are Israel's friend. But one of the things that I look back on with deep dismay in our history is when people disagreed with our government over the Vietnam War, there were those who said, love it or leave it. I don't think that's patriotism. I don't think that's love of country. Love of country is being forthright enough to say when you disagree and when you think your friend is not on the right track. And the settlements are a great example of that. I had the privilege of attending the Herzliya conference when I traveled to Israel and saw the very robust debate about their future, and it became clear to me that getting to a two-state solution is an existential question for Israel. Israel, long run, will not be a Jewish democracy unless they get to a two-state solution. And the settlements get in the way of that, and they are an existential threat to Israel, not to mention to the Palestinians and what it does to their lives and the injustice of it. So I will be a forthright champion of a two-state solution, and I will be not afraid to be direct with our friend Israel when we need to be. I'll just the two parts in order. We talked about Islamophobia, we talked about Black Lives Matter. When it comes to Islamophobia and Donald Trump's despicable statements and targeting of Muslims in his campaign, I bring the perspective of someone who has engaged at a human level with those who he is most pointedly targeting. On the ground as an infantryman in Fallujah, I came to have enormous admiration for the citizens of Fallujah. By the time I was there, their city had been turned into a moonscape. They were trying every day to reclaim power over their lives. And so you would see people out every day with hammers, repairing their storefronts, repairing their homes. A firefight would break out. They would run for cover. If that happened here, we would be inside for weeks. 15 minutes later, they would come back out and they were resiliently reclaiming their lives. For people to reach the point of desperation out of a situation that we have unleashed in that region. I have a 6-year-old daughter. To reach the point where they would put little children in flimsy crafts and push off to the far sea. For this country not only to turn a cold shoulder, but to scapegoat those people is outrageous, beyond outrageous. So when I announced my candidacy, it was at the height of the controversy over Syrian refugees, and Donald Trump had proposed his Muslim ban. So what I said when I announced was, not only should the president stand the line Not only should he continue to welcome 10,000 refugees into this country, he should do what the refugee organizations have been saying to us we need to do that we are not doing, which is to do our part, we need to take in 100,000. Boy, I got grief from that, but I'll tell you, I'm glad that I did do that, because that's the right thing to do. Not only for our values, because we are a country of immigrants, but for our security. We are destabilizing regional allies. We are seeing people spending months, it'll become years, in refugee camps, which is the #1 place where radicalization is likely to take place. So we are being foolish and we are being immoral. When it comes to Black Lives Matter, I bring the perspective of somebody who can look a police officer in the face and say, yes, you do. You have a very tough job. The things that keep me up at night about my time in Iraq were decisions that you had to make in a split second. And what keeps me anxious is watching in my mind the way our platoon reacted when we started to take casualties from people who approached our convoys, approached us, and we thought they were civilians, and it turned out they were targeting us. So I know it's a tough job, but it's a public service job. And thank goodness for the cameras, because I will be somebody who will look police officers in the eye and say it's a tough job, but there is justice and there are standards, as there is in the military. And we need to do better when it comes to training, when it comes to selection, and ultimately when it comes to accountability. And that's where public officials have a role as well, to call out misconduct for what it is. Thank you. So thank you very much. It's a great question and really, really important right now as we're talking about widening inequality and a hollowing out of our middle class. Trade schools are enormously important, as are our community colleges. When I was policy director to the governor, we created the Pathways to Prosperity program, which was a program designed to start with kids in high school and move them all the way through a public-private partnership with our community college system and with employers, so that they got the training they needed to go into, the first tranche we did was high-paying manufacturing jobs. So they got the training they needed, and there was a job at the end of the day, and they got on-the-job training as well. So it's tremendously, tremendously important and something that I've long been involved in championing. I do want to just address the larger debate as well around higher ed, around tuition-free higher ed. There's a debate right now about should we do more, or if it's tuition-free, is it something for nothing? I want to drive a bargain with our young people that involves service, that is not something for nothing. If you are willing to step forward and commit to serve your country, not just in the military, in the Peace Corps, in AmeriCorps, yes, we will allow you to graduate debt-free. I think it's a great bargain for our country. I'm privileged to serve on the Service Academy nomination board for Senator Carper. It's one of my favorite days of the year, interviewing young people that want to go to our service academies. I always feel better about our country after talking with them. And if you look historically at our GI Bill, that helped create the middle class. When those veterans came home and we helped them go to college, they paid us back 8 and 9 times over in economic prosperity, and they were also one of the most civically engaged generations we've had. So if we could do that again, if we could strike that bargain with young people where we will help you get ahead, so that you can graduate and be an entrepreneur, because you don't have this huge debt over your head, but take some time and give back to the country, you'll be more civically engaged, and we'll all be better for it. So the answer to the question is I oppose TPP, and let me tell you why. Marines have a very simple ethos. It's the ethos that is responsible for my being here today. We leave nobody behind. We advance together, leave nobody behind. My Marines would have never left me behind. But that's exactly what we've been doing now for decades with our approach to trade. We've been competing on the basis of lower wages and fewer protections for our workers and our environment. And it's a losing game for us, and it's a betrayal of the American dream. So I'm tired, myself personally, of us having two separate conversations. Trade, yes, no, and then a separate economic conversation about what kind of economy ought we have. So proponents of trade vote for these trade agreements, they move forward, and then we get on to what kind of economy ought we have, and they say, well, people are on their own. Well, those two things are intimately linked, and we need to bring those conversations back together. So we need to develop an approach to our economy where we do all advance together. It wasn't so long ago that John F. Kennedy said a rising tide lifts all boats. We can do that again. That begins with the question that was asked about trade schools, about apprenticeships, investing in our community colleges. It begins with an approach to raising wages. We need to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour, and we need to index it to inflation. And we're in a union hall. We need to make it easier to organize, not harder. Conservatives and corporations have been attacking unions with 1,000 little cuts for decades now, and too many Democrats on one little vote or one little vote here or there think, well, that's not a big deal, until the bottom falls out. And we've got to turn that around, because it has never, ever been the case that corporations gave a livable wage, benefits that you could retire in dignity on, and that you could raise a family on out of the goodness of their hearts. They gave it because there were unions there to demand it, because workers had fought and sometimes bled for those unions. And we need to, as elected officials, stand behind them. And lastly, given where we've gotten, we need to be bold about providing real retirement security in this country. Employer-provided pensions are going away. The middle class is being squeezed such that it's hard enough to do right by your kids, let alone put aside the kind of nest egg you need to retire in dignity on. That's why I have proposed to expand Social Security, to provide a new Social Security Part B, which would raise basic benefits by $11,699, that would provide a real cost of living adjustment that actually is key to the costs that seniors face, including prescription drugs. This is something that I have experience with working with Senator Carper. I was working with him when the federal government passed the largest expansion of entitlement program in our history. We covered prescription drugs for the first time in Medicare. People thought the sky would fall. This was radical. We can't have this huge expansion of entitlements. Has the world ended? No, but seniors have coverage for prescription drugs, and we have something to work on and we need to improve, which is we need to go back and make sure that Medicare can negotiate for prices for prescription drugs to save the taxpayers money and save seniors money. So we need to think big, and we need to think seriously about how we really, genuinely rebuild the middle class in this country.